all. Good evening. Is my screen visible to everyone? All right. In our last class, what we have seen is what is the requirement of record level security, and we have also seen the importance of permission set. All right, and we have compared how a profile is being, what is the role of a profile in Salesforce, and how comes permission set is helping us extend the functionalities. What we have seen. All right. In today's class, what we'll discuss is we are going to see the record level security, how it is basically implemented in Salesforce is what we are going to see today. All right. Now, so I have this pyramid structure here. Inverted pyramid, where the base level is, in the base level we have this organization by default. On top of that we have this role hierarchy, and top of that we have this sharing rules, and last but not the least we have manual sharing. All right. So what exactly these things are? These things are nothing but they are trying to help the number of records that are shared to an individual. All right. So remember our example, if manager B wants to see the records of X, Y, Z and A, so manager can only see his own records. All right. He can see his or her own records. But what if he wants to see the other people's records? Here we are extending the access that he already has by sharing the records that are being owned by these people. All right. So that is one scenario. And second scenario is, what if X wants to share his records with this set of people? Right? What if X wants to share this record with this set of people? X, Z, Y, and A. What if X goes on leave and he wants to share his work with Y? All right. So those are the scenarios that we are going to see, and these settings that we have, or this kind of a sharing that we have in the structure, will help us achieve this functionality. All right. Now, so understanding, like, we have got to know that these are the things that we are going to look at, which will help us get this functionality. All right. So if I look at the structure, what it says is, it says that as in when I go up, what is being increased or what is open up? What is it being opening up is the number of records that are visible to an individual are being opened up. All right, the number of records that are being visible to an end user are being opened up. That means if the user at this level, all right, we'll understand what is this level. User at this level has 10 records. As in when he goes up, it would be 10 plus records. Depending on how you want to basically build this record level sharing, he or she will be having more than the records that he initially has. All right. He or she can basically look at more than 10 records that he has already seen. All right. That is the advantage of your record level security. As in when you go up, the number of records that are being visible to your end user are being increased. All right. So as a part of record level security, we have kind of 4 levels. All right. The first level is your organization-wide defaults. It is the organization-wide defaults. All right. If you ask me, is there any kind of a example that I can give you as a part of a real-time example that we see, which will help us understand this example a little better is, all right, you can always take an example of a credit card. All right, you can always take an example of a credit card. All right. So if the bank is basically issuing credit cards to all the employees, let's say there is a company of 100 people, all right, 100 people, and the bank is basically issuing credit cards to all these 100 people. All right, and this bank has level 1, or you can say silver, gold, and platinum cards. All right, silver, gold, and platinum cards. All right, and each of the level has its own limits. All right, silver might have 25k as a limit, monthly limit. I'm just taking an assumptionary numbers here, alright? I'm taking these numbers as an example here. Gold might have 50k as a limit. Platinum might have 1 lakh as a limit, alright? 1 lakh as a limit. Now, this bank B, will it give platinum cards to all the people? Will it give platinum cards to all the people? The answer would be definitely no, because not all people will be using credit cards. Not all 100 employees will be using the credit cards the first glance, or as soon as they get the credit card, they'll not start using that 1k limit, 1 lakh limit. Alright. So what the bank will do is they'll basically distribute the base level of access to everyone, which is nothing but the silver level of access, which gives 25k as a credit card limit per month for every employee. Alright. So this is what they'll get. They'll get silver as a kind of a base level or a kind of a level 1 access to everyone, where they can use the credit card limit up to 25k, for example. Alright. So out of 100 people, 50 people started using it and 50 people ignored this credit card that has been given to them. Alright, they just have it and they rarely use it. Alright. Now out of this 50 people who are using it, what I got to know is, or what bank got to know is, 25 people have already crossed that limit of 25k. Alright, out of 100, 50 people started using that credit card, and 25 people for the first month, they have crossed that 25k limit. Alright. So then what bank will do? Bank will basically look at their employee, as in like they look at their payslip, and if their limit is more than, if they're basically earning more than 25k, what they'll do is they'll increase that limit to 50k. Out of this 25 people who are exceeded that limit, they'll increase their limit to 50k. They'll increase their limit to 50k. Alright. So upon second month, what the bank got to know is, out of this 25 people who have already got increased or already moved to the second level, which is the gold level, out of them, 10 people have already exceeded that 50k limit also. Then what bank will do? Again, they'll revisit their pay slips, or they'll again revisit their monthly income, and they'll increase their usage to platinum. They'll increase the usage to platinum level. Alright. They'll increase their usage to platinum level. So why do you think that bank has not issued the platinum cards to everyone? Why do you think that? Why the bank was not issuing this platinum card, which has that 1k limit, to all the 100 employees? Alright, the reason being, everyone have their own usage and their own way of utilization of that credit card. Alright, they have their own way of looking at a credit card. Alright, depending on what is their need, the company has increased their limit accordingly. Alright, there are only 10 people who have actually need that platinum card, and out of that, 15 people are just using the 50k card, and out of that 25 people, they are happy with that 25k, and rest all are not bothered about that credit card itself. Alright, so depending on what kind of access that a end user needs, we can also give that same level of access here. Alright, so the point why I have introduced this kind of a side example here is to basically introduce the concept of, do I need to share all the records to everyone, or is that a kind of a thing that I need to think through and just give only those records, or only share those records which they need. Alright, so without any thinking, if I own this bank, if I issue all these platinum cards to all the people, it might not make sense to me. Alright, I'll issue only those cards which are necessary for their usage. Alright, so based on that experience, I have issued 100 cards of silver type, and out of which I have increased that silver to gold for certain set of people, and from gold to platinum, depending on their usage, I have moved them, or I have promoted them. Alright, same applies in your Salesforce also. Alright, if there are 100 records for a given object, it makes sense to think through what level of records, or what all records needs to be shared with certain set of users, or do you need to share all the records to all the people. Alright, so depending on that need, we have this structure where you define the base level of access in your org by default, as the name suggests. you define the what is the base level. As per this example, the base level of access is 25k. All right, silver card. Same goes with your Salesforce also. Here, what you do is you say that this is the base level. This is the base level of access that I give to all the users that are there in Salesforce, and depending on their activities plus their roles and responsibilities, I'll be promoting them so that they can see the new records or the records that are not being shared with them earlier. All right, depending on their roles and responsibilities plus their activities in the system, they'll be promoted to the next role or a kind of a place where they can see more number of records than they are earlier been shared with. All right, so that is what we are going to see. All right, this first or yellow box, what exactly it says is, it says that what is that base level of access that you want to set in Salesforce. All right, so when you are setting up your record level security, the first thing that you need to look at is what is the base level of access that I want to set up in the Salesforce. All right, so that is what you need to do the first thing. All right, I'll quickly clear this diagrams. All right, so what is the base level is what we need to understand. All right, so org-wide defaults or org-wide sharing is both one and the same. We can also call it as OWD. Right, the short form of org-wide defaults is nothing but OWD, which is the starting letters of the words that we have. It is also called OWD in normal project language, or it is usually called as OWD. All right, now what exactly it says, or OWD or org-wide sharing or org-wide default specifies the base level of access that the most restricted user should have. All right, so what it says is who is the most restricted user, and for that user what is the level of access that you want to give. Remember that credit card example that we have discussed. In the credit card example, who is the person who is least using my credit card out of that 100? The 50 people who are not at all using my credit card. These are the people who are least using my credit card. All right, so for that user, what is the base level of access that you want to give? So this question is about identifying who is the restricted user and what level of access do you want to give to him. As per my example, I wanted to give 25k as a limit for the users who are using that card for very minimum usage, or the people who are not at all using it. This number might change, but this is what I have given to them. Right? So identifying the restricted user, here the restricted user or the user who is not at all using my card are the 50 people, for which what is the limit that I have set? I have set the limit as 25k. All right. So this organization by default will also play the same role in Salesforce, where it is asking you who is the restricted user for given object. All right. If you are talking about record level security, it has to do with your objects. The reason being, your records are being saved in your objects. So that is why it always makes sense to refer it with an object and go ahead with the analysis of identifying who is the restricted user, and for that restricted user, for this object, what is the level of access that you want to give. All right. So I'll reiterate these points in this example. All right. So on my left, I have this diagram, kind of a flow chart. All right. So I'll minimize the kind of a confusion and I'll give you the simpler steps that you need to follow. All right. If you are asked to set the record level security, if you are asked as a kind of a person who is working in a Salesforce project, if you are asked to set up a record level security in Salesforce, the first thing that you need to do is OWD, org-wide defaults. That is what you need to set the first thing. All right. As you know, this is the base level of access. And what you can do, once you set this OWD, always you have the capability of expanding the number of records that are being visible to your end user. All right. Once you set your base level, like the 25k limit, you can always increase that limit, but you cannot downgrade that limit of 25k. All right. So that is what you can always keep in mind. All right. So in order to set up your OW for your entire org, the first thing that you need to do is identify the object on which you want to do that analysis. If I want to say that for given object, let's say if I am saying that for a given case object, I don't want the other people to see my records. Alright, if I say that I don't want others to look at my records, case records, alright, so it is dependent on the object that you are talking about. Alright, the restricted user is talking about, or we are referring to that restricted user on what level of access that you want to give to the case. Alright, same restricted user can look at all the records on your account. I'm just giving an example. I'm comparing two objects here, account and case. This restricted user R cannot see the cases that I create. Alright, but this user can see accounts that are created by me and the accounts that are created by any people. Alright, so we are talking about an individual object. Alright, so that is why the first step is to basically look at your object. Identify the object where you want to decide your OWD. Identify your object on which you want to do the OWD setting. First, your object needs to be identified. Alright, so that means you'll start with the first object. Let's say if you are in your org, if you have 10 objects, you'll start with the first object. Alright, so identification of the object, or the first step, is nothing but the first object that you look at in your org. Alright, I'm repeating the point. So identifying of the object is nothing a kind of a rocket science. If you have 10 objects in your org, you'll start with first object. That is your first step in your identifying your object. Second one is identifying the restricted user for that object. Identifying the restricted user for that object. Alright. If I take this example of a case object, now I've identified out of the 10 objects, the first object that I want to set the OWD is the case object. Alright. For that case object, I need to identify who is the restricted user. So how can I call a person or a user or a profile as a restricted user is depending on the activity that he can do on this object. Alright. So as per my project that we have, as per the project that we have discussed, we have technician as a profile, customer support as a profile, and marketing rep as a profile, and sales rep as a profile. Alright. Will a technician be a restricted user for a case object? Because technician needs to visit that customer location depending on what is the case that is being raised. Alright. So that means depending on the activities that a user can do with that object, I am marking them as restricted user or a normal user. Alright. So is there any scenario where my technician should not see a case? Alright. So, or you can put it as like this. This restricted user is never going to see this case record in his lifetime. If the answer is yes, that is your restricted user. Alright. So technician will always look into the case that is raised by your end user. Alright. Or else like the customer support, if they raise a case, the technician is the person who look at that case and understand what he has to work on his work order. Alright. So the technician will never be a restricted user for a case. If I go on to the customer support, is the customer support a restricted user? The life of the customer support revolves around this object called case. So he will not be the restricted user for this object. If I talk about the marketing rep, if I talk about the marketing rep, he or she will never see the case record in his life because his module is nowhere connected to the service module. His job is to do the marketing side. Alright. In his lifetime, he'll never see a case record. Will there be any chance that a sales rep needs to see a case object? There might be chances where a technician or a end customer might say, earlier I have purchased a product saying product A from your company. Now that A product is not working. Now the customer or the sales rep needs to give an answer to them saying that the case that you have raised is being resolved by these people and you will be getting a email notification shortly or something is what they need to say. Alright. There might be a kind of a 10% chance where your sales rep might need to look into the case record. Or for some businesses, even this is also false. In that case, who will be the restricted user? My marketing rep will be my restricted user. Alright. Identify your restricted user by doing this analysis. Alright. A simple question that you can ask is there any scenario where my user is going to look into that object records? Right? That is how you can find out your restricted user. Alright. Now, third step is understanding what level of access that you want to give. All right. Remember the level 1, level 2, level 3 discussion, the silver, gold, and platinum. Same ways in Salesforce we have access called private, and the second one is public read. And the third one is public read write. If you ask me what exactly these words mean to Salesforce, or what exactly they mean is, this private access says that if you set an object OWD as private, that means only the person who has created that record can see that record. If I am creating a case record, only I can look into that case, but no other person in Salesforce can look into that case. Alright, remember our discussion XYZ creating a cases, and they are able to see their own cases, but they are not able to see the other people's cases. It is because of your OWD. Where they have set the OW access as private. If you want that particular record only visible to that owner, then you'll set that access as private. Alright, or you can go with this scenario. I would repeat the third point of setting your private, alright, in terms of the point 2. But what I'm trying to help you understand is what is private, what is public read write, and what is public write. Alright, that is what we are discussing. I have not touched how is this restricted user influencing the OWD. Alright, so I'll complete this points, and then we'll go ahead and visit why we have identified point 2 as per our discussion. Alright, this private is basically telling that if the OWD is set as private, only that owner of that record can view that record. Only that owner can look into that record, and he can do whatever he wants on that record depending on the object level access that he has. Whether he has an edit access, whether he has a delete access, he can go ahead and do it according to the object level security. Alright. What about public read? If you set the object OWD access as public read, that means everyone in Salesforce can look into this data and they can read the data. I would repeat, if you set any OWD of an object as public read, every user in Salesforce, every user that is connected to that org, they can look into that object data. They can look into that object records. That is your public read. If you set it as public read, right, it is a kind of a data that everyone can look into and they can edit it according to their needs. Private, where a record that has been created by me will be only visible to me. Public read, this records will be visible to everyone, but they will not be able to edit that information. Public read write is a kind of a setting under OWD, where if you set an object as public read write, the data or the records that are there under that object can be visible to all the users and they can edit that information as well. Alright, so those are these 3 settings. Now, how do I define the OWD for a given object? Alright, how can I define a OWD for a given object? Alright, here are the steps. Alright, so after identifying your object, after identifying your restricted user, understanding what is private, public read write, first question that you need to ask is, who is the most restricted user for this object? The restricted user for a case object, as per my discussion, the object that I've identified is case, and the most restricted user that I've identified is marketing rep. What I have done, I've asked this question. This question is, who is the most restricted user for this object? The marketing rep is the most restricted user for this object. And the second question that I need to ask is there ever going to be an instance where this marketing rep needs to see this case records? Is there ever going to be an instance where a marketing rep needs to look into the case records? If the answer is yes, there is a separate flow. If the answer is no, then you need to set it as private. Alright, it might be a kind of a negation statement here, which might be creating a confusion. But what I'm saying here is, if there is ever going to be a situation where a marketing rep needs to see a case record, if the answer is yes, there is a separate flow. If the answer is no, you can directly put it as private. And that means what I'm saying to the system is, this marketing rep will never going to be there is no situation in my entire project design where a marketing rep needs to look into a case object record, right? So if that is the case, put it as private, all right? Now, so once you have done with the private, that is where you will go ahead and understand other object. But if your answer is not satisfied, if the question has been solved as there is a situation where your market rep needs to look into a case object, then there is another flow where you need to answer one more question, which is nothing but, is there ever going to be an instance where this marketing rep needs to edit that case object records? If the answer is yes, you have to put it as public read write. Public read write. If the answer is no, you have to put it as public read. Alright. So I'll draw that same diagram up above here, alright, and we'll discuss that in detail. So this is restricted user marketing rep, and the object that we have identified is case. Alright. The first question that we need to ask is there ever going to be a scenario where my marketing rep needs to look into the case objects? If the answer is yes, there is a separate flow, and if the answer is no, there is a kind of a end point here. So I would repeat the question, is there ever going to be a situation where my marketing rep needs to look into the case information? If the answer is no, there is no scenario where my marketing rep needs to look into my case, then you put the OWD as private. You'll put the OWD as private. Talking to your business, you have identified that there is a scenario where your marketing rep needs to look into your case object. Then what you'll do, you'll continue with another question which says, is there ever going to be a scenario where your marketing rep needs to edit your case records? Edit your case records. If the answer is yes, we'll put it as public read write. Public read write. If the answer is no, there is no scenario where my marketing rep needs to edit a case record, then what you can do is you can put it as public read, right? So if he doesn't need to have an edit access, that is where you'll put it as public read. If he needs an edit access, you'll put it as public read write. If there is a scenario where the marketing rep should never able to see a case record, that is where you put it as private, right? So this is how you will fill out your entire 10 objects. This is how you will basically come to a conclusion which kind of an OWD that you need to set for individual objects. This exercise, if there are 10 objects in your org, this exercise needs to go for all the 10 objects, and once you have that, you will basically create a table saying that for object case, it should have private access. For object account, it should have public read write access, because that information will be used by all the people. If it is a work order, you will put it as private. Alright, so these conclusions have came into this conclusion just by iterating over these questions and this information that you will get from your business. Alright, so you and me cannot decide on this information because every business would act differently. Only this information you get to a conclusion when you talk to your business. Alright, so this is your object. This is how you can basically conclude your discussion. Create a table where it says object, and finally your OWD set. Alright, so that is how you will basically come to the conclusions. Alright, so that is your OWD kind of an assignment. You will go through all the objects, ask these questions, and depending on your business inputs, you will design your OWD. This exercise will not happen through technical discussion. It only happens once you have the business inputs, once you have the inputs from your client, Alright, so that is how you will set your OWD. Alright, after doing everything, what we have done is we have laid the base level of setting. Which is nothing but your OWD. Alright, so OWD basically gives you that base level of access. It is similar to giving your 25K to your users who are not even using your credit card. Alright, it is defining this is the level of access that you want to give to the user who is most restricted for that particular object. Alright, and this restricted user might differ from object to object. It is not the same user that you will basically take it for granted. All right. So that is how you define your OWT. All right. I would pause here to see if there are any questions. If not, we'll proceed on to the next thing: how to extend the base level of access to the next level. All right. So remember in the credit card example where we have given the silver card. Now upon users utilization, we want to promote him to the gold card. All right. How we can do that is what we are going to see in our next topic. All right. I would pause here to see if there are any questions. If not, I'll clean up the screen and we can proceed on to the next topic. Are there any questions? So after finding the restricted object, the next step is to basically answer these questions that you are seeing on the screen. Right? Ask yourself, is there any scenario where the user needs to look into that case object? If the answer is yes, you need to answer another question: is there any scenario where he needs to edit that record? If yes, if he can edit that record, you will put it as public read write. If he is not able to edit that, if he should not edit that record, you will put it as public read. If there is no scenario where this user needs to look into that case or any object information, you will put it as private. If employee is creating so people who are asking me about the manager and all, I'll get to that point. So after the entire objects are created in the project, the customer, it is an ongoing process. There is no kind of a hard and fast rule where you say that once I create all the objects, that is where I'll define the OWD. That is one way of thinking it. But this kind of an analysis should go hand in hand. All right. So architecture wise, they would have already come to a conclusion that this is how I want to design the system. All right. And that is where they'll define the OWD as well. All right. It is not at the end of your project you decide your OWD, because just by doing that, what would happen is, let's say at the end of the day, if you are giving the platinum card to everyone, it might not make sense, right? So that is why initial phase only they'll think of a solution where they want to give this level of access, and upon the project goes on, they would basically come to a final conclusion that this is what we'll give, and we'll extend this access using the other settings that we have. All right, this is the base level of setting. This is what I can give, and upon setting the base level, I'll extend the access by using the other modes of record level sharing or record level security that I have in the system. All right, so that is how it has been designed. There is no kind of a hard and fast rule, even though you can do it at the end of the project, but there is a kind of a cost that you need to pay if you're designing at the end, right? Now, all right, so we are done with this one. All right, and to understand how to set up this OWD in Salesforce, after completing this role hierarchy, we'll revisit this topic, or else I would say after completing the theory part of role hierarchy, then we'll go to the system and define how to set up the OWD and role hierarchy at once. All right. So it is more kind of a theoretical subject as of now, theoretical concept, I would say. Setting up your OWD, once you have that chart, hardly takes 2 minutes. It hardly takes 2 minutes or less than 2 minutes to set up your OWD for your entire organization. But the process that we have discussed, the entire discussion of how to identify which level of access that you want to give to a given object, that takes more time. All right. Once you know that chart, once you have that chart where you say this object needs this access, it hardly takes less than 2 minutes to configure everything. And that applies for your role hierarchy as well. All right. Now, so there are like a couple of things that we need to understand before we hit this topic called role hierarchy. I'll complete them and then we can discuss what is role hierarchy and what all things that we can do in the role hierarchy. All right. So there is this concept called groups. Right? There is this concept called groups. Right? It can be found under your administrator manage users. You have this public groups. All right. If you ask me what exactly the role of these public groups is, it is to bunch certain set of people depending on what activities that they are doing. Right? Depending on certain filters, you can group the people. All right. Just like let's say if you go to any school assembly, people will be standing in queues. Right? People will be standing in queues. If there is an assembly hall, people will be standing in queues. How they are standing in queues depending on a criteria, which is nothing but to which class they belong and to which section they belong to. Right? So depending on that basis, they are being classified into groups. The first group which says first class A section, maybe the second group might be the first class B section. Depending on a given category, they are being classified as groups. Same applies in your Salesforce also. Alright. If you want to address all the people who are in the region called, who are in the city called Hyderabad, alright, what you can do is you can create a group and say that you can create a group in Salesforce saying as Hyderabad group, and you can add all the people. It is similar to our WhatsApp group. Depending on the need, you'll basically add people to that group. Right? Same applies in your Salesforce. A public group is a set of users. Right? It is a set of users. And one more added advantage of Salesforce is it can also accommodate groups inside a group. It can also accommodate groups inside a group. All right. Now, it can accommodate groups inside a group also. Right? So we'll quickly understand how to create a group, and then we'll understand how is this group influencing the topic called record level security. Alright. So there is one topic that I've left after discussing the OWD, then I've switched to this public group, where I'm talking about identifying or clubbing multiple users. Alright. So once we go through this topic, and then we'll be switching on to the topic called role hierarchy. Alright. So there is a kind of a need to understand these groups. Alright, for the next topics that we are going to discuss, and keeping the time in mind, right? So there are like couple of things that we need to. There are a couple of scenarios where we need to understand what is a public group. That is why I'm covering this topic in front, so that we have enough information while we are discussing the topics. Alright. Public group is nothing but a group of users, and it can also contain groups inside that group. Right? If this is a bigger group, it has smaller groups that are added inside it, and they are like individual users also added into that public. Alright. So how to create a public group? So search for your public groups. It would be under your administrator manage users. You will find the public groups. Once you land here, you can see the existing public groups, or you can basically click on new button to create a public group. So what I'll say here is I'll name the public group as public group August. Right. So this name can be anything specific for your business. If you want to group them based on the region, you can say that Asia region public group, or you can say that very specific region, very specific public group, saying that this people will be located for Hyderabad region, or any specific kind of a category that you take, and you can club them based on that category. Right? So that is how you can club them. You might ask me, how is this public group different from a profile? Alright, in your profile, you have people who are doing similar activities. In your profile, the people who are connected to this profile would be doing similar activities. What is a public group? Public group basically defines a category saying that these are from this all users are from this Hyderabad region, or you can say that this all people are from Mumbai. Alright. There can be a technician in this public group who is residing in Hyderabad. There could be a customer support. There could be a manager. There could be a sales rep. There could be a marketing. Irrespective of their profiles, you can add them into this public group. Alright. So that is how your profile and a public group are different. Right. Right. So you'll give a name to your public group. You'll give a name to a public group. And this setting will understand in a role hierarchy, right? Grant access using hierarchy. We'll understand this setting in our role hierarchy. But if you see this drop down, it says search, all right? you can search the number of users that you have in the system and you can add them into this public group. So what I've done, I've added 2 users into my public group, and I can also add the public groups that I've shown you earlier into this group also. So what I can do, I can basically add users, and I can also add other groups into this main group. Okay. This is what I can do, or else you can say that the groups can be like this. The groups can be like this. There can be a group called Hyderabad Technicians Group, or there can be a group called Mumbai Technicians Group, or there can be a group called USA Technicians Group. Alright, and these all people are under one category called Technicians Group. Right? While creating a Technicians Group, you don't have to again add the users into this Technician Group. What you can do is you can bring all the regions Technicians Group and add into a main group called Technician. Alright. So if you are referring to a master group or a kind of a bigger group, what you can do is you can basically add the smaller groups into this master group. Same thing I am doing it here. I have added 2 users and I have added the groups that I have already created. Right? So that is how we can combine, or that is how you can group people. Alright. So once you are done with the grouping, what you can do is you can scroll down, click on save. Alright. So what is the need of the public group? Like I've told you, there are certain scenarios that we are going to discuss in our next classes where we need to understand this concept. Alright. So if there is something that I'm telling you, I'll let you know the reason. For time being, we don't know that reason. That is why I'm giving you kind of a hint. Alright. So this topic is needed to understand the other topics. Alright. Alright. So what we have done, we have basically created a public group where it is holding 2 users and another group called May 22 group, or I think I've added this group into the group that we have created. Right. Where is our group? Yeah, this is our group. So what I've done, I've added 2 users into this group and I've also added this group into this group. Right. So now if I look into this public group, I have 2 users plus the users who are into this public group. Right. So that is your public group. And the usage of this public group, we'll discuss that in tomorrow's class. Alright. Now, are there any kind of pending items that we need to look at? Yes, there are some pending items that we need to look at. And there is another concept called roles. Right? There is another concept called roles, which is under your administrator, manage users, we have roles. Alright. So what is a role? It is nothing but if you are talking about a technicians as a profile, alright, there would be technicians at ground level and there would be kind of a technicians who are a senior technicians or a technicians who are little experienced than these people, and there might be technicians who are at the manager level who are guiding these people, alright, alright. So in order to identify them, to which role that they are sitting in, with the help of profiles, I am not able to do it, because profile basically tells me what a user can do. It cannot identify to which role he or she is basically aligned with in the real time instance. Alright. A simple example to that is if you look at any project life cycle in IT industry, you would have developers. Developers would report to the team lead. And team lead would report to the manager, and manager would report to a director, and director would report to a kind of a CEO, right? CEO might report to the owner of that company, alright? So these are nothing but the roles that an individual is playing. Alright? If you want to replicate this kind of a structure in Salesforce, what is the topic that you need to use is that topic is nothing but your roles in Salesforce. Alright? That is nothing but the roles in Salesforce. It defines how your organization structure is basically built. Right? Alright? So it basically talks about how your organization structure is built. And if you ask me why do I need to set up this structure is, alright, a simple example that I can think of is, Your owner is the kind of a superlative person in that organization. Right? Your owner is the person who should know each and every data that is being created by everyone. Alright. He should know what a developer is doing. He should know what is a technician doing. He should know what a manager is doing. He should know what a director is doing. He should know what a CEO is doing. Alright. But for a manager, not all the times he or she will be handling all the things that will be done by a CEO. Right? Manager has a very limited scope that he needs to do when it comes to when it has been compared with the CEO activities. CEO has lot many activities that he needs to do, and manager will be playing certain part in the activities that are done by CEO. Same goes with your developer. Developer will not handle all the things that are being done by the manager. Team lead, same goes with your team lead. Team lead will not do all the things that are being done by your director. Alright, there are certain things that they will do. But for a director, he should know what a manager needs, what a manager is doing. He should know what a team lead is doing. He should know what a developer is doing. Alright. So depending on their role, they should know certain information. If I basically take this example to a real-time project, there would be customer care people, alright, the base level of people who are talking to the end users, and there would be a kind of a senior customer care support people where if there is an escalation, these people will handle, and there would be a kind of a managers in the customer support who will be handling these people. Alright. For a manager, he needs to know the information that is being handled by the CS, customer support people, and he should also know the information that is being held by your senior customer support. Or in short, it is the scenario that we have discussed where B as a manager wants to see the information of X, Y, Z, and A. Alright. If the B wants to share the information, or B wants to see the information that is being held by X, Y, Z, and A, this is what you need to do. You need to set up the roles, and using the role hierarchy, you can expose that access to your manager or to the people who are above that hierarchy. Alright. So the structure that we are looking at here is nothing but your role hierarchy, where everyone is one level other. Alright. If the team lead wants to look at the data of your developer, that is where your role comes into the play, and it brings in the information that is being owned by your developer to your team lead. So team lead information will be going to your manager, and it also gives the information that is held by your developer. And your manager information will be visible to your director. Manager information, the records that are being visible to the director is the records that he owns. If he owns 10 records, that will be visible to him, plus the records that are owned by your manager, let's say 2 records, and the records that are being owned by your team lead, let's say 25 records, and the records that have been held by your developer. I'm just talking about an example that you can relate to. So these are the number of records your director can see. Same goes with this example as well. Alright. So that is how you will set up roles in Salesforce. Alright, that is theoretical discussion of your roles and how to set up roles in Salesforce. Search for your roles in the quick find. Click on that roles, click on that setup roles, and click on that button called setup roles. And here is what the role hierarchy that I have in the organization. Alright, so these are all the people that I have in the organization. Alright, so these are the individual roles that I've talked about. Alright. So how to read this information for this given organization? There is a CEO, everyone reports to him, and there is the CFO, only certain people report to him. There is a chief sales officer, certain roles are reporting to him, and there is COO, some people are reporting to him, and there are like some director roles where some marketing people are reporting to him. This is how we can read that entire structure of an organization. Alright. Now what I want to do is I want to create a role who will report to CEO, Right? I want to create a role in this organization. He or she wants to directly report to a CEO. That means I want to build a role in my hierarchy. Let's say if this is owner, there is the CEO. I want to create a role such that he or she will report to the CEO. Right? To CEO, there will be so many people who will be reporting. I want to create a role who will directly report to the CEO, or a role which is just below a CEO. Alright. So how to do that? How to do that? Simply click on add role under your role that you want to create. Right? If the user or if the role that you are creating, that you are going to create, should report to CEO, then what you need to do, you need to go to the role that is already there, which is nothing but our CEO in our example. There would be a kind of a link which says add role. You can click on that role. And that is where you will be given an option to basically name the role that you want to create. Right? I'll put it as what? Role August. Right? I'm putting as this name, and this information I'm keeping it very simple. The reason being, I just wanted to highlight that point. And if you want to really create this information in your project, you and me will not have that information, or you and I will not have that information. We need to get that information from the business. Alright. So there is no kind of a hard and fast rule that the role name should be like this. It is dependent on your business or your client requirement. Alright. So once you have that requirement, you will put that as a label name, and that is where your role name will be populated. Same story, it would check if there is any duplicate name. If yes, it would throw an error. If not, it would save that information. Alright. So once done with your configuration, click on save. Alright. So this is how your role August has been created. Right. Now I don't know whether it is basically reporting to CEO or not. Right. If you have that confusion, you can look into this field which says this role reports to whom? CEO. This role reports to directly the CEO. Alright. And now what I've done, I've created a role called role August. And how is this influencing a user? Is you can always go to your users. If you go to your users, you would find a field called role. When you go to your user, when you go to any user, I would say, if you go to any user, there would be a field called profile where you define what he or she can do, and you can also tell them in which role they are in. Right? So there would be a role field given to your user that defines what level of things that he can do in Salesforce, what level of records that are being shared to him depending on his role. Alright. So there would be a role field on your user which defines what level of records can be shared to him, or where exactly he sits in the organization. Alright. Where exactly he sits in the organization is what your role field gives you, which is on your user field. Alright, which is there on your user field. Alright. Now, so if you want to basically create a user under this role, you can always do it from here by clicking on the new user. Or if you want to assign any person to this role, you can click on this assign users to that role, and you can select that. You can select that user from the drop down and assign them accordingly. Alright. You can do that from here. Right. For now, I want the CEO role because I want to look into all the data in the system. Right. Just to show you the difference. Alright. So this is how you can set up your roles. Now, did we achieve the requirement of how my employees' information is being shared to the manager? Right. This example of XYZ, A and B, or A and Z. Did we go through this scenario where we need to share this information to B? The answer is no. What we have done is we have basically created a role called manager, right? We have created a role called manager, and we have created a role called employee. And what we have done is we have basically assigned this employee role to these people. So what I've done, I've created X, Y, Z, A, and B as users, and I've assigned them to a role called employee. And I've created a user called B, and I've assigned it a role as manager. Now what has happened is we have created a structure called employee reports to your manager, and a manager reports to the higher employees. Alright. We have created this structure, and the second thing that we have done is we have assigned users to these roles. Without users, it is just a structure in Salesforce. With the users, it basically takes that information into consideration, and it would expose the number of records that needs to be shared to them. Alright, we'll get to that point. For now, what we have done, we have created the structure and we have assigned the users to that structure. Right? We have assigned the users to the structure. So earlier it was a manager and employee, the roles that we have created. Now we have assigned users to that roles. Now we have assigned users to that roles. Now, how to set this role hierarchy? Alright, how to expose this information that is being held by your XYZ in a employees with your manager. The simple and straightforward answer is your role hierarchy. A simple and straightforward answer is your role hierarchy. What exactly it does is, it basically exposes the information that is being held by your people under that role. If you have role 1 and role 2, and role 2 is reporting to your role 1. Role 2 is reporting to your role 1. Using your role hierarchy, what you can do is, the records that are being owned by role 2 will be exposed to your role 1 people. Alright. So there is a kind of an employee role and there is a manager. Alright. To this role, there would be so many users connected to it. Let's say user 1, user 2, user 3, user 4, user 5, and the list goes on. Now, just by creating this structure and enabling this role hierarchy structure, what happens is, the data that has been owned by this role will be shared with the role which is above that role. Alright, it says, in Salesforce, roles are defined to increase the data visibility as a particular user has. Right? Let's say the manager has 10 records. Just by doing this, if let's say every employee has one record there in their pocket, right? So just by doing this role hierarchy, what happens is, if there are 4 users and the manager is having 10 records, what are the number of records that a manager can see if the role hierarchy is being shared or enabled? He can see 14 records, 10 from his own bucket and 4 from the records that are being owned by his employees. The 4 more records that are being owned by his employees. Right? So it says, using your role hierarchy, roles are being defined so as to increase the data visibility a particular user has. Earlier, the manager had 10 records. Because of this role hierarchy, we are exposing 4 more records to him. That basically serves the purpose of how can a manager will get to know the information or the work that is being done by his employees. Alright. The data visibility can be increased by using the shared tables. This. We are going to see that in next topic. And it says, role hierarchy allows the users sitting in the higher level have access to the records owned by the users having the role lower in the hierarchy. I would repeat. So this role hierarchy basically allows the higher level person to access the records owned by the lower level in the hierarchy. Alright. It allows the people to access the records owned by the people who are having the role less than what they are having. Alright. Simple example to remember this one is manager and an employee story. Alright. That is what we have in the role hierarchy. Alright. So it is just to expose that information that the employee has to the higher people. It could be your manager, it could be your director. Alright. The manager is sitting below your director. Now director would have the information from your manager as well as the employees reporting to that manager. Alright. So if there is a director to the director, there would be multiple managers will be reporting to him. Alright. And each manager will have again employees reporting to them. Alright. Now the director will have the information coming from the employees, coming from the manager, and the records that are being already with them. Alright. It is like if they have 10 records, the manager will give them another 10 records each, which would be 30 example. Right? And the employees will give one record. Let's say if each manager has 5 records, it is basically 5 into 3, 15. That is how the number of records that have been shared with the director will increase. If there is another person at the top, he or she will get these records plus the records that have been owned by them. Right? That is how your role hierarchy basically works. It shares the records at the down level to the top level. Alright. Why we are doing it? Because as in when you go to the top, the owner needs to understand what is happening in his entire organization. What is happening in the entire organization. Alright. So that is your role hierarchy. Alright. Like I've said, once you have the information ready, who should be basically showing that access, or which objects information needs to be visible to the top management. Setting up the role hierarchy and your OWD is very easy. How to do that? Search for your sharing settings. Search for your sharing settings. It would be under administrator, security controls. You will have this sharing settings. Click on it. So here is the place where you will define all your, at least 90% of your role record level security. Here is the place where you will define your 90% of your record level security. Alright. The first one is your OWD, or the organization by default. How to set your organization defaults? Once you have that list ready where it says this object needs to have this level of access. Alright. All you need to do is click on this edit button. Once you have that list ready, scroll to the object that you are looking for. Let's say if I'm looking at, let's say I'm looking at any object. Say we have case here. We have case here, right? So I can set the access that I need, right? If I'm looking at any object, let's say employee, right? I can define where it is public, read only, or read write, right? Depending on what you have decided, you can basically set that access here, right? Depending on the entire discussion that we had for the object level, depending on the discussion that we had for OWD, that is nothing but organization by default, you would set that value here. And how can you set your grant access hierarchy, or how would you enable your role hierarchy is just by checking this checkbox. If you want to share that records that have been owned by your employees or the base level of people with the higher level of people, all you need to do is check this checkbox. Alright? And one more thing that you need to remember is, for standard objects, you cannot uncheck this checkbox. You cannot disable the role hierarchy you cannot disable the role hierarchy kind of a records distribution or record sharing from the lower people to the higher people. For standard objects, you cannot disable that. Right? That is your role hierarchy kind of a limitation. You cannot disable the standard objects role hierarchy. Always for standard objects, the records that are being held by or owned by the role which are below will be shared with the people who are above that role. Alright? You cannot disable the role hierarchy distribution for your standard objects. For custom objects, you have the ability to enable or disable it. So if you want to enable the role hierarchy, all you need to do is check this checkbox which says grant access using hierarchies. If you check this checkbox, your records from a role 1, which is reporting to role 2, the records that are being owned by the people who are connected with the role 1 will be exposed to the people who are in role 2. Alright, so that is your role hierarchy and your OWD setting in Salesforce. Once you have that list, it hardly takes 2 minutes to configure it. Right? All you need to do is decide which value you need to pick and decide whether it needs to have the role hierarchy or not. Depending on those things, you can check or uncheck, and you can click on save. Right? Alright, depending on your analysis, you will enable or disable. There are like a couple of things that you cannot do. It says, let's search for an object called demo August 6 batch details. Alright, so I can see my object here. What I'll do, I'll copy this information. Click on edit, and I'll search for it. Here I am not able to find it apart from this place. When I'm using Control F and searching for that data, I'm not able to find that value here. The reason for that is our account and this demo August 6 batch details are connected via master detail relationship. That is why it is saying that my OWD is basically dependent on my parent. It says controlled by parent. It is saying that my OWD setting is being controlled by my parent. It is controlled by my parent. So what is its parent? You can get to know the parent of this object by going to that object. As we know, the parent of this object is nothing but account, which has public read-only access. So any person in Salesforce can access that information, account information, but he or she will not be able to edit it. Same goes with your demo object as well. Everyone can see the records which are in the demo August 6 batch details, but he or she will not be able to edit that information. Alright, so that is how you can basically enable or disable your OWD for your master detail records. Alright, so that is all for today's class. In tomorrow's class, what we are going to look at is we are going to look at the other two aspects of sharing the records, which is nothing but sharing rules, where one user wants to share his records with another set of people, where we'll be using the concept called groups that we have understood today. And last but not the least, we have this manual sharing, where we want to share one record with another person in case if he or she is basically going on a leave, where he wants to share that record with other set of people. Alright, so those are the scenarios that are being left out in the record level sharing. Once we are done with that, we'll be completing our record level sharing concept. Alright, and I'll open up the session for Q&A. If you have anything, let me know. So, Kalyan, can you be specific on which window that you are looking for? If you are looking for this sharing settings window, I've searched for sharing setting in the quick find. Sharing settings, under administrator security control, I have the sharing settings. Click on it, and that is where you can land on the screen. Right? Correct. To summarize what we have discussed today, we have basically gone through the record level security, and we have understood what is the OWD. And second thing that we have understood is how records that have been owned by employees is being shared with the manager. Right? Those are the two things that we have understood, and we have seen how to set that up in Salesforce. How to set that up in Salesforce is what we have seen. Right? So in tomorrow's class, like I've told, what if X wants to share his records with other people in the group? That is what we are going to see. And the last but not the least, how can X share his record with Y? Just only with Y is what we are going to see in this manual sharing. Alright. So those are the two topics that we'll be covering in tomorrow's class. Alright. Alright, I don't see any questions coming in. In case if you don't have any questions, we can call it a day for today and we can connect tomorrow. Alright. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll connect.